Hey guys, we are back at IKEA to grab another piece of furniture for a project. And this time we are going to be getting something to create a custom giant room divider. How cool is that? But the piece we're gonna get, we're not just gonna leave it as is, obviously.
No.
We are gonna give it a little bit of a glow up, but first we actually gotta go get it. Come on, come with me. I absolutely love a trip to IKEA. I love looking at all the new stuff and pretending these spaces are my own. But back to the task at hand. Checking out the IVAR shelving units, this is a great modular storage system that IKEA has, and I think it's going to be perfect for the base of this room divider. Oh yeah, you probably want to know what the actual plan is here. This shelving unit is going to be a room divider in a space that Kelsey is giving a makeover. And given the space requirements, I got shelves and side pieces to make this combination with one wider and one narrower unit. Kelsey's inspiration is a floor-to-ceiling built-in look, but these shelves are not quite tall enough to touch the ceiling, so I'm gonna build a platform for them to stand on. And I cannot stand for wasted space when there could be storage, so I'm also gonna incorporate some basic pull-out drawers. And it's not just gonna be a room divider, it's also gonna be a media unit that houses the TV. And I might also just make a couple other modifications as well. When hacking an existing piece of furniture, I find that I need to have the piece in front of me in order to get exact measurements and have a feel for how the piece works in person. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it together in the garage. I need to cut down the side supports before I start putting this thing together. I'm just using a circular saw and a speed square to cut about 7 inches off the bottom of the supports, so their final length is 82 inches. I needed to cut off a bit because I wanted the bottom storage drawers to be bigger and more proportionate to the shelves than what they would have been if I kept them as is. Cutting a short piece of lumber like this with a circular saw and a speed square is actually pretty easy because you just need to line up the blade of your saw with the mark you've made and then hold the speed square up to the base plate of the saw as a straight edge. I want to add something special that I will fill you in on later, but in order to do that, I need to drill 4 holes for 2 dowels to sit in. I just used some scrap 3/4 inch dowel that I had in my stash. Stay there. Stay! Delightful. Okay, well, I shut the camera off before I had completely finished assembling the shelf. And so what you didn't get to see was as I was putting on the last shelf, the entire thing fell over on me. And I knew this. When you're building these, there is a metal cross brace that you are meant to attach to the back, which stabilizes the entire thing. Otherwise, it's gonna fall over. I knew this. I intentionally chose not to attach it because our very next step was going to be something that was effectively going to take the place of the cross brace. So even though we've got it attached to the shelf on the back wall, we don't want it to fall over again. So I am very eager to get this next step completed. What I'm gonna end up using is some 3/4 inch plywood that I purchased at the store the other night. And I have cut it down to fit between 2 of my shelves, both the wide section and the narrow section. And I'm actually going to attach it to the shelves and the side pieces using pocket holes. That's gonna be enough to stop the whole shelf from moving side to side, and we're not gonna need to use that little metal cross brace. You with me? Oh yeah, baby. So I got my 3/4 inch thick plywood attached to the front side of our shelf. And this piece here is not yet attached, but I think I'm actually just gonna leave it loose for now. This one is actually only a 1/2 inch thick. I found a piece of 1/2 inch thick plywood in my leftover wood stash. And I think that's just perfect because it goes over the edge of the shelf. And I think it nicely lines up with this cross support here. But honestly, it's feeling pretty secure. So I'm really happy with what we got done today. And I think I'm gonna just leave this like this overnight, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Hi. Is it time to stop? Alrighty. I'm coming in. Okay. Before I head off to bed, there is something I want to try. now that I've got the sawdust washed off of me, which brings me to the sponsor of today's video, Foreo Sweden. The FAQ 202 is a new generation of LED face masks that Kelsey has been loving for months, and I've been super excited to try it ever since I saw her take it on vacation with her to Japan. This thing looks so cool. Hello. I have never been particularly skilled when it comes to makeup, so as I've gotten older, I have opted to prioritize good skincare over makeup so that I can feel fresh and confident in my bare face on a daily basis. But as a self-proclaimed homebody, I would much rather spend a few minutes in the comfort of my own home working on my skin than going out in public for hours to get in-spa treatments. That is why I absolutely love the idea of the FAQ 202. It is ultra lightweight and wireless, meaning I can use it while I'm on the couch, in my reading chair, even in my bed right before I go to sleep. Even though Kelsey and I have very different face shapes and skin types, the FlexiFit silicone molds to fit any face shape, and it's got 8 different wavelengths with NIR to tackle a whole host of skin concerns. This unit is great for helping to reduce redness, which isn't one of my main issues typically, but minimizing pores, evening skin tone, helping to make my skin look softer, smoother, and less dull. Yes, please. Click the link in the description box and don't forget to use the code TSG30 to save 30% off on almost all Foreo products. The code also applies to already discounted items, so you'll still receive an extra 30% off. You do not want to miss out on this great offer. All right, I'm off to go do some skincare. Good night. I'm starting the day by cutting the 3/4 inch plywood we were using yesterday to make the base platform that is going to eventually house the storage drawers. All right, so this platform for the shelving unit is gonna be pretty simple. I've got 2 long sides and 2 short sides, and we're just gonna join them together with pocket screws. And I think I'm also gonna add just a little bit of interior framing for a little extra support. However, before I screw them all together, I'm actually going to cut out my drawer fronts out of the front long piece, because I think that's gonna be a lot easier to do when the piece of wood is flat than when it's attached to 3 other sides. Since these offcuts are going to be the drawer fronts, I'm going to do some plunge cuts on the circular saw and then use my handy dandy jigsaw to cut into the corners. This will give me a crisp and polished corner for my drawer fronts and the frame. Okay, nice, nice, nice. So in order to attach that platform box together, I am just gonna be using pocket screws, and you've already seen me drill those. And I also have some 1x2s that I need to cut down, but that's not that interesting either. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about the history of the IVAR shelving system. This shelving system is almost 60 years old, and it's gone through some name changes in that time, like Bose, Ingo, Ufe, but for the past 41 years, it's been known as IVAR. And side note, if at any point in this video I pronounce it IVAR, that's just because that's how I've pronounced it my entire life, and old habits die hard. So on the note of trying to do some more correct Swedish pronunciations, I suppose I should be calling the store something more like IKEA. But that is going to be a much, much harder habit to break, given that everyone I know calls it IKEA. However, I did live in Montreal for a while, où on le prononçait IKEA en français. So go figure. But speaking of calling the shelving system IVAR my entire life, that's because it's been in my life for a really long time. And we've got the 40-year-old one in the garage that currently has the new one tethered to it for safety. Okay, little platform, we're coming together. Opening, another opening. It's gonna be great. Guys, our platform is almost done. It has been reinforced with 1x2s the whole way around. Particularly in the corners here, we've got vertical pieces that are gonna support the weight of the legs of the shelf so that every leg has the weight distributed right down to the floor. And I've also got the pieces up here that are to support the top of the platform. And then, you know, everything's just kind of screwed to each other. So it looks like now I just need to cut a top for this platform. And then once that's on, we might actually be able to put this under our IVAR shelf and actually see what it looks like. Yeah! Baby! Oh my God. It's perfect and sturdy. It's so sturdy. dirty. Actually, I kind of like this for my back. It works. You know what? I think that is a pretty good day's work. It's looking great, and tomorrow it'll look even better. I'll see you then. Good morning. It was a little bit dark and rainy this morning, which honestly I kind of like. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the wood for all of my drawer boxes on the table saw, but you might have seen me use the miter saw yesterday to cut down my 1x2s. I just wanted to tell you that all of these cuts can absolutely be made with the circular saw. So I'm gonna go ahead and get those cuts made and the drawer boxes built. Everything's gonna be a butt joint with screws just drilled in from the outside. And then we'll proceed. So to keep things simple for this build and really easy to use as drawers, we're actually not gonna be doing drawers at all. They're just gonna be boxes on casters, and you're gonna be able to wheel them in and out from under the shelving unit very, very easily. So when I originally looked online, I saw these 1/2-inch casters, and I knew that I wanted something really low profile for these because otherwise it would just take up valuable drawer space. But when the 1/2-inch casters arrived, it became very apparent that they are way too small, like comically small. I don't know if you can tell, like there's my finger for proportion. We will not be using the 1/2-inch casters, and instead we will be using the 1-inch casters that I ordered as replacements very quickly after opening the box of the others. Gorgeous. Hey, so there we go. We got our 2 little drawers on wheels, and they work perfectly. But I know what you might be thinking. These drawer fronts look a little ugly. I do agree with you, but that is where these come in. You remember how we so very carefully used our circular saw and jigsaw to cut these out of the hole, and that is so that we could use them as drawer fronts for these drawer boxes we made. So they just need to be trimmed down ever so slightly so that it's not rubbing on the floor. And then we attach them to the drawer box from the inside so you don't see any screws. First, I tried using some shims to prop up the fronts, but then I remembered having watched a YouTube video that said to use playing cards for more precise spacers. These particular playing cards are near and dear to my heart. Comment down below if you can tell me why these cards from a trip to Sable Beach might be special to me. Once I was happy with the placement, I used some clamps to hold everything in place and then used some screws to attach the fronts to the drawer. Next up, I want to make one of the shelves into a half shelf to add a little bit of visual interest. First things first, I needed to cut a shelf in half. Now, I could have just cut the metal hardware off of a shorter shelf, but since some of my shelves did break when the whole thing fell over, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to make use of a broken shelf. I started off with a piece of 2x4, which I cut down smaller. I then glued the 2 pieces together, and once that was dry, I cut off the ends so they were straight, and then I cut off the edges so I ended up with a 3-inch square block. In order to turn that square block into an octagon, I consulted a YouTube channel called Bob's Wood Stuff, and I learned that if you just set the blade at 45 degrees, you rest your block on the blade, you adjust your fence over so it's touching the corner of your block, then you can just run through each corner and you end up with an octagon. Easy peasy. That was literally one of the easiest things I've done all day. I think they're gonna look pretty cool once they're sanded up and stained, but you're gonna have to wait to see those until this shelf is in place. So obviously these holes are supposed to be here, but this is where that side support was supposed to go. I opted not to put it in here for a cleaner look, but that does leave this big old hole here, and I don't like that, so we're gonna fill it in. And to do that, we're gonna use these, which are the side pieces that were supposed to be there, and we're just gonna chop off the little nib here and use that as a plug. And so there's a hole where these dowels were supposed to go in to lock it in place anyway, so we're just gonna use these to plug those holes. Once the glue was dry, I cut off the overhang and sanded them down, and it was like the hole was never there. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Good morning. It is a little bit of a dreary day again out there today, so I thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to take a little bit of a break from the woodworking and work on another element of this project that we need to get done. Going back to the dowels we added earlier, one of the asks for this project was to have some sort of cat-related element to it. So we're going to add a cat hammock, which is going to hang from these two dowels. Once again, the as-is department at IKEA really came through for me. I was able to find this Yatiro cushion cover, which is a 26 by 26, and it is an indoor-outdoor cushion cover. So I think this fabric is going to be strong and durable, because I think this is just about the right width for what I need it for. So I just need to cut it to the right depth, add a piece of batting, which I already have so much of, and then close it up and kind of just string it between the two dowels. As a little cat hammock, are we seeing the vision? Earlier, as I was sitting and wondering if this fabric would be soft enough to be a nice cat hammock, my own cat Lou came up almost immediately and decided to prove to me that yes, a cat could indeed be very, very comfortable laying on a fabric like this. So originally I went to the fabric store to get a couple of zippers so that I could make this cat hammock removable from the shelving system. However, when I got there, I kind of changed my mind when I found this snap tape stuff. It's basically like a piece of ribbon with a whole bunch of snaps on it, and I just thought it looked really cool, and I've never used it before, so why not give it a try now? Once the snap tape is pinned in place, I'm using a zipper foot to get as close as I can to the snaps. Oh my gosh, guys, that turned out better than I expected. From the conception to the execution of the plan for this cat hammock, I think all in all, I did a pretty good job. As we all know with cats, we won't actually know if they enjoy this until we put it into the space. But for now, I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. I am, however, getting a little bit of cabin fever. I've been home for a few days now working on this, and I just need to get out of the house, and I do need to go pick up some stain options because this will not be left raw wood. Oh no. So, let's go. Choosing a stain color is always a hard task. While I try to decide, I'm going to disassemble the whole divider. It's going to be so much easier for me to sand and stain all the pieces one by one than with everything together. Of course, you can just do this step first if you're building this thing at home. I'm also adding some edge banding to the exposed plywood edges for a more polished look. Dark walnut, wood stain, ultimate. You know what, you can have the French too, because I said a little bit of French. Teinte pour bois ultime, dans la couleur noyée foncée. Let's do it. For applying the stain, I used a brush to add on the bulk of the product, and then used a rag to blend everything out and get an even application. We love a spontaneous sun shower in the middle of a huge outdoor workday. Like it's just gonna be a drizzle, right? Oh boy. Not. We're supposed to rain today! I did a coat of stain on all of the pine and 2 coats on the plywood for the best match. And then once that was dry, I added some polyurethane to all the pieces for protection and shine. This whole staining and top coat process was a huge task, but the divider is going to look so much more elevated because of it. Good morning, guys. I am here on site where Kelsey is doing her makeover. And here is where our creation is going to live. I'm not gonna lie, it ended up being a ton of work and it was a little bit dicey to fit everything in the car, but I did it. And it's here, not in one piece, maybe like 30 different pieces that I have to assemble. So I better get to it. But I gotta start with clearing out this TV. Are you coming to help, Olive? Good job. Of course you stop. What?
She's a genius. She's a genius.
So now that we've got our 2 front pieces of plywood on that are acting as our cross brace, this thing is actually pretty sturdy on the platform. But we did want it to go right up to the ceiling, but just because of like fluctuations and measurements and everything, we didn't want to try to be super precise. So what we ended up deciding to do was attach these leveling feet into the top of each one of the side pieces, and that way we could just adjust right up to the ceiling to give a nice snug fit. So in theory, we just need to turn the feet until they reach the ceiling. So before deciding on the final placement for the shelves, I think we're gonna go ahead and mount the TV just to give us a better idea of how it's all looking together. Now, I picked up a no stud TV hanger and seen a couple people on YouTube use. The idea is you're just supposed to be able to nail this into drywall, no studs required, and it holds up your TV. I have my doubts, and I'm not quite ready to go ahead and nail this into drywall just yet. So luckily for us, we've got plywood here. I think I'm gonna pop 2 little screws in, kind of towards the center to bear a lot of the weight and really grip into the plywood, and then do the rest as nails. So even though we've got those leveling feet at the top of the unit to hold it snug to the ceiling, but it can't hurt to add just a little bit more security. So I went to Lee Valley because they had these like bronze colored corner braces, which I thought would just be perfect with the color of our wood and stick out a lot less than those silver ones. Yes, it has been determined that there are in fact 2 cats, Tofu and Olive. So let's hope that they like this little cat hammock that we made for them, which is gonna go right here. Now for the final touches. Adding in the half shelf and those supports we made. I'm nailing some trim pieces to the top of the divider to hide the leveling feet. And those side pieces I cut the nibs off of, well, they're the perfect trim pieces to add to the exposed shelf sides for a more polished look. And lastly, some knobs for the 2 drawers that Kelsey brought back from a trip where she visited Sweden and Denmark. How fitting. Thanks for sticking with me on this journey. It was a lot of work, but totally worth it for a custom piece that looks built in, even though it's totally renter friendly. It does look a little lonely in the space though, so if you want to see how good it's going to look in a decorated space, make sure you tune in next week to watch Kelsey start the makeover. I will see you guys then. Bye!